Several weeks ago, as part of this year's cohort of Earth Journalism Network grant-aided reporting on Belize's blue economy, journalist Marco Lopez published an investigative piece titled Code Red in the Blue. The focus was the status of Belize's fisheries stock and conflicting positions. Under the Belize Fisheries Project, BPF, funded by the Summit Foundation, renowned international fisheries experts determined that 17 commercial fish species are overexploited, and they recommended that critical management measures be instituted to address the crisis state. The Fisheries Department rejected the BPF findings, but Lopez's investigation saw Dr. Richard Appledorn, the scientist who developed Belizes methodology in 1996, confirm that to be using his same methodology now, especially for conch, from almost 3 decades ago would yield inaccurate data as the methodology is now outdated. He also remarked that the BPF is using one of the latest methodologies available. We sought the opinion of Julie Robinson, Belizes program manager at TNC, on Lopez's report.
I think it is absolutely important for the Fisheries Department, along with the scientists from the Belize Fisheries Project, to really come together to look at the data and to look at the process and the protocols to be able to improve it. So I know that there is a discrepancy between the two, but the way to, I think, really and truly figure out what the actual status of our fisheries is for these groups and the scientists and the technicians to really come together and work together to determine that.
And that's an outside view because you're not a part of authorities, but authorities at this point have a stance where they are just treating that as completely hands off, but it's very critical that they actually engage, as you say.
I agree. I mean, I encourage and I highly recommend that the government and the scientists from the Belize Fisheries Project come together, because it's like it takes two. And I know there's been a lot of conflict, but the only way we'll be able to move forward is to be able to utilize the resources that are being offered, as well as the knowledge that we have within country. And so these two really need to come together.
The Fisheries Department did not refute Lopez's report, and today we asked former Fisheries Administrator Beverly Wade, who remains in an official capacity within that sector, to comment. She only admitted that there can be different perspectives based on how a fisheries scientist looks at fisheries data. However, she rejects the affirmation that there is general overfishing.
I know that fisheries management in Belize have always been a collaborative approach. In fact, the NGOs that you're seeing in the room and other NGOs are working constantly with the Fisheries Department, looking at fisheries management. I understand that there are particular issues with that particular project, but I don't think that it's a matter of a hands-off approach. I think the details are not necessarily out there, and I would encourage you to find out about the details one day. With regards to overfishing has always been tagged as a threat. It's not anything that we have, say, as a country, been running away from. It is something that we work with partners to see how you could address aspects of overfishing. I wouldn't say that the resources in Belize are totally overfished. I think that is a very wrong description. But if you're a fisheries scientist, you could well look at the data and to find areas like we do with our partners on the ground that we know there are localized fishing, overfishing happening here, and what are the strategies that we're now going to employ to those areas of potential threats. The same way we have to look at the threat, our fisheries resources are being impacted by climate change. This is the worst bleaching air we have ever seen in Belize, and the reef is really habitat to those important species that we're looking at. How do we now rationalize that? How do we also rationalize the fact that we're now looking at how development is now approached in this space? The important thing is to ensure that we are able to communicate better, that we're able to share the information with the user base, and also to look at how we take this integrated approach to the resources at the end of the day, because central to it is livelihoods also. And so we have to take into consideration the social and the economic aspects of it.
Fishers told us that fish bought in Honduras ends up in Belize, and one said this is particularly so during the tourism high season. However, Wade affirmed that this is not indicative of our fishery being overfished.
Well, I don't know if you could use importation of fish as a gauge for overfishing. The importation of fish is meant to provide fishers resources for a particular sector. And I'll say this because I have some experience when I was over at the Fisheries Department some years ago with regards to permitting. So what you're actually importing are tuna, some of the other specialities. There's also the importation of some fillet. When you have a developing sector like tourism in Belize and you simply don't have, I don't necessarily agree that it's a matter of the fish not being there. I would say that it's a function also of our capacity, right? So you now have dedicated finfish fishermen in Belize who are producing thousands and thousands of pounds of fillet for a tourism sector. That's a part of the issue. So when you have a sector like that, there's nothing wrong with importation. Countries all over the globe import fish. The important thing for us to do is to look at how fish is doing. The last Health to Reef report card that was done by the Health to Reef initiative funded by the Summit Foundation that was launched, I think, a couple months ago, showed that finfish and commercial fish on the reef are rebounding. Something is working. We're doing something good. But that doesn't mean that because we're importing fish, there's no fish out there. You have to look at it more deeply and more comprehensively.
Wade also refuted the conclusion that the Fisheries Department is relying on an outdated methodology for its stock.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think the Fisheries Department continues to engage with partners and scientists globally, cutting-edge science when it comes to species like lobster and conch. I know that even currently they're engaged with WWF to now look at a comprehensive stock assessment for lobster in Belize with cutting-edge scientists. I'm not here to belittle or to say that the scientists from the Belize Fisheries Project are right, nor am I here to say that they're wrong. As a person who is trained in science, there are always different approaches and different philosophy depending on who you're talking to. I think what is important in Belize is that there's a strategy, there are the approach that you want to take, there's serious considerations that you have to take when looking at fisheries management, and those things would have to be looked at comprehensively. No two countries' approach to fisheries management are the same because we all have different considerations. And I don't think that the Fisheries Department could be branded as being so reckless in a sense, to be just sitting here and to say, you know what, we just do things from 15, 20 years ago, and that is it.